So, hi everyone, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you've enjoyed the speakers that we've had so far. So my name's Grace, I'm from Ukie, and over the next 15 or so minutes, I'll be picking the brains of our panellists on all things talent and recruitment. So today we're joined by Andrew Smith from Spilt Milk Studios and Nisha Binas from Roll 7. So first things first, Andrew and Nisha, would you like to introduce yourself first to everyone before we begin?
Sure, I'll go first if that's all right, Andrew. I am Nisha Minaz. I am the head of HR and operations for Roll 7. We are a small-ish gaming studio, and we sort of specialise in indie flow state games. Some of our titles being Oli Oli, Not a Hero, Laser League, and yeah, that's me.
Hi, I'm Andrew Smith. I'm the founder and creative director at Spilt Milk Studios. We're a even smaller independent studio based out of the Tentacle Zone in Farringdon in central London, or we would be if things were normal. And yeah, we've kind of done a little bit of everything over the years, and we're sort of having a bit of a soft reboot at the moment, which is very exciting. But yeah.
Brilliant, thanks guys, glad to have you here and thank you for your time. So as we all know, or I hope you all know by now, the theme for this year's Hub Crawl is the life cycle of a games business. So as a result, I'm sure we have lots of people in the virtual audience who are maybe interested in starting a games business, might be fairly early in their business cycle, or might be looking to be recruited themselves. You might want to know about certain milestones or checkpoints you should be aware of as your business grows. So that being said, Andrew, let's start with you first. What do you think are the trigger points where you realise you need to hire more people and scale up in terms of talent?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So I think it's a really difficult thing to be aware of is if you don't have the time to think about that kind of thing abstractly, like if you can't find the time to sort of take a step back and realize that you need, to staff up or hire people on to take some of the responsibilities away from you, especially in the small team, then that's kind of like, it's kind of chicken and egg, right? Like you're never going to hire them to find the time to think about the fact that you need to find the time to think about it. Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of like a soft problem, I suppose, that you just have to, you have to make sure that you step away and step back from your business, from your games, from the act of making or running a studio, and sort of figure out, where your goals are and how far along you are towards them, and if you have all the expertise that you need to get there. I guess on the flip side, there's an element of, if you're trying to sign a project or you raise some funds for a project and it is of a scope that requires you to hire people on, then that's obviously quite a clear point at which you need to start thinking about it. But I'll leave it with a bit of a, if you're thinking about it, then that's too late. You need to get in earlier than that.
Well, what do you think, Nisha? What would your answer to this question be?
I think we were at that sort of similar stage that you were talking of, Andrew, before I was hired. So I was hired to take a lot of that workload away from the CEO and focus on a bit of a recruitment strategy. So we have regular recruitment meetings now. Our producers on the projects that we have look at milestones and try to link up the workload with our headcount and if we've got the right resource in place at the right points of the project. We also are very big on no crunch. So we do not do any crunch at our studio. And if we find that workload is sort of at that tipping point where people are having to work sort of longer hours, then we look at resourcing or we look at project planning, and it tends to be extra resource that can help with that as well. So there are a few different ways that we identify sort of recruitment needs.
Great. So, so when it comes to hiring, the past year has been quite an interesting one, to put it mildly. We know many of our members, lots of studios, have been shifting to remote work. In fact, here at Ukie, we've been working from home since March, which feels like 10 years ago now. So that's what brings me to the next question, and I'm sure this is particularly relevant for all 7. Is geography important when recruiting people? Do you think we'll see an increase in remote hiring in the long term?
So Roll 7 has been a remote studio for 5 years now, 5 or 6 years. So we have never really had offices, especially since the last 3 years where we've experienced a significant amount of growth. all of our employees have been hired on the basis that we are a distributed studio, so we don't have an office space. And we actually used to meet up in Ukie offices once every 6 weeks to try to sort of keep that, you know, human interaction going, which really helped. I think like everyone, you know, we are missing out on that side. But in terms of geography and where people are based, it doesn't make any difference to us. We have people based all around the globe, and we make that work through freelancer contracts, contractors, suppliers, that type of thing, as well as our UK-based people. They're based up and down the UK, and we just make it work with all the tools that we've got. So geography doesn't really play a part in where we hire from.
What do you think, Andrew? Isn't Spilt Milk as well generally a remote studio as well?
Yeah, we've gone through sort of an interesting life, I suppose, when it comes to office space and things like that. So we started off pretty much fully remote, just through necessity. You know, we didn't have enough money to pay rent for a studio, and we, you know, developed a bunch of working practices around that. And we're talking sort of 2014, 2015 here. Like previous to that, I'd basically just worked out of quite a literal shed, and projects were so small it was me and someone, right? That was it. But as soon as we had like an actual team, it necessitated thinking about, you know, how we interact online, and how to kind of, like you say, the personal contact's really important, but so much of the creative work that we do and the problem solving is about, like, not literally, but like peeking over someone's shoulder and seeing what they're up to, or, you know, someone going, oh, I can't believe this damn thing's not working, and then someone hearing that and saying, oh, hey, I can get you around that problem, whatever, right? And so you need to have ways to kind of emulate that, I suppose, in a remote sense, but it's entirely doable, right? You just have to, it's just a slightly different rigor, a slightly different sort of process. So even down to kind of like having the chat, I remember very, very early on, like saying, you know, we just need to, like, if you step away from your desk for more than 5 minutes, like if it's more than just like a cup of tea or something, you should probably say, because especially around like milestone delivery, if someone's like, this thing's broken and there's no response, and that happens like 3 or 4 times and you've no idea why, you know, it just generates stress, right? That wouldn't ever happen in an office situation. So that was always an interesting thing. But then, yeah, we spent some time at Ukie. We, as I mentioned, we're part of the Tentacle Zone. We love being there as a shared office. So there's a lot of benefits to being there, but we like to be flexible about it. And so when we came back to working 100% remotely, it was kind of like falling back on old habits, and we were really fortunate in that sense.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to hiring remotely as well, I think there's some difficulties in onboarding and helping people feel part of the team. I was wondering if you guys could share any hints or tips, or from your own experience of hiring people, what processes do you go through to help people on board?
For role 7 and onboarding. Oh, is that somebody? For role 7 and onboarding, we have quite an itemized list that HR go through, an induction list, to make sure we don't miss out on any of the sort of key check-in points. It is very different to welcoming somebody in an office where you would take them around and you do introductions, everyone gets to see them. We use Slack for our kind of comms and introducing people, and we have our own kind of like internal induction party parrots that we use to welcome them, and our own little kind of like gimmicks that we use to welcome people on board, and we try to set up the right meetings so that they get the insights and the guidance from the right people throughout their day. I think a lot more planning, a lot more checking in, a lot more prep work has to go into it's less subconscious, more conscious way of doing inductions, and I think that's what we found works the best, rather than sort of compared to when you're in an office, you kind of assume lots of chit chats happening, and obviously virtually you just don't get that, and the intros and things like that.
Yeah, I guess it's quite difficult to sort of reflect that, you know, the coffee breaks and the tea breaks you'd usually have in an office, or the water cooler moments. It's quite difficult to enact that virtually. What about you, Andrew? What experience have you had with this?
Yeah, so we're huge fans of Slack and Discord. We kind of moved to Discord over the last couple of years, but part of that's down to like addressing that kind of social element. We have our community Discord and we have our development Discord, and they were combined and now they're separate. But the point is, like, it's all in the same window, and so there's chat happening in one or the other, and making sure like we have meeting rooms as channels that are labeled as if you were in a real building, you know, with some of the characters that we have from our games, things like that, you know, and like Nisha said, you know, trying to come up with like conscious ways to kind of encourage the stuff that would happen naturally, and sometimes you can kind of play into or lean into the fact that everyone knows it's all a bit weird and a bit awkward. You know, I don't think that ever really gets old, because we're so, like, you know, human evolution, right, versus the last couple of years. We're so conditioned to being in person that it's always going to feel a little weird. So, you know, I sort of tend to, if there's ever any sort of like, you know, welcome to the team, and, you know, we're gonna like break the ice by, I don't know, what's your favorite ice cream? Everyone go round and everyone's like, oh no, what, I didn't, and you don't tell anyone because it makes it funnier and it makes it more sort of like casual, and I'll go first just to sort of like, you know, because I take the hit, right? But it's just, it's you kind of, I suppose it's easy for a certain personality type to kind of roll into that, but you need to be aware that you need to kind of have that structure and that process, and if you don't do it, you might not notice the negative effects, right? So you have to really take that step back and then again sort of assess it objectively.
Yeah.
We've mostly been doing it with interns, which has been really good, because like the cost of getting it wrong, if I'm being completely mercenary about it, is a lot lower than if it's like a new hire that you're hoping is like your new tech lead or something. But yeah, I think it's just something you have to, yeah, you can measure it, you can set it up, you can establish process and get better at it.
So far we've been talking about fully employing people. Sometimes for smaller or micro studios, it might be easier to use contractors. So I just wanted to ask, have you used contractors? And if so, what are the pros and cons of doing so?
I'll let you answer, Andrew.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Big question. So yes, we have. We've worked with contractors for most of our lifetime as a studio, I suppose. And you know, I think hopefully the benefits are kind of the same for both sides. It's about flexibility, and it's about sort of having clearly defined roles and responsibilities and things. So being able to have a network of people that are trusted, that come recommended, that have the skills that you're looking for, and you can bring them in at relatively short notice, and they can help you solve a problem or achieve something that you couldn't as a team, and then you pay them for that, and then that's it, right? And that is more expensive for the time that you're paying them, but generally speaking, you wouldn't necessarily be able to have them on staff full time because you wouldn't have the work for them. In a small team, it's interesting because, well, the smaller you are, the more everyone has to have some sort of transferable skills across more than one discipline to kind of, you know, do all the heavy lifting. And the larger you grow, the more you can look at specialists, but the more stable you are, the more able you are to offer permanent positions to those people. So there's kind of like a little bit of friction there, I suppose. And yeah, I think the advantage of bringing talent in-house, you know, a permanent employee, is that you get to like keep them, right? Like a favorite. You get to make sure at the higher end of someone who's incredibly experienced, you get to have all of that wonderful knowledge and experience that they've got to bring to the table, and you can kind of plan around that on a longer term. You can use their experience to help build the company and the products in a way that you couldn't at sort of a more junior level. But at the junior level, you also get to kind of hopefully have some influence on how they grow as a person into the role that you require or that you see them, you know, best fitting, and that can be, there's like a lot of hidden benefits to that, the things that you don't consider, like you know, just kind of company fit. You know, someone who's been shipping AAA games for 15 years comes in and they probably rightly think they know what they're doing, whereas that might not quite match with how you do things. And so if you're bringing someone in who's a bit more just sort of fresh and green and excited, you can kind of harness that energy and kind of avoid some of those frictions. But it's all sort of a balance, really.
What do you think, Nisha? What do you think are the benefits and the cons of using a contractor?
Sorry, my child just walked into the room. So one of the kind of struggles, I guess, would be IR35 when we're looking at sort of freelancers and contractors. We are small enough to not to sort of really have to look at that at the minute, but eventually that might be something that we would, well, it will be have to be something that we need to consider. I'd say about a third of our employees are actually contractors or freelancers or suppliers in some way, shape or form. the quickness that they're available is definitely an advantage. They are used to working in a project-led way. And I'm going to stop talking there because my kids are making too much noise in the back.
So now it comes. So there might be some people watching thinking, you know, where can I find talent? And equally, there might be people watching who are on the job hunt themselves and want to know where they can advertise their skills. So I just wanted to ask you guys, in your experience, what channels have you used to acquire new talent for your business? Andrew, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'd almost answer with like, which channels haven't we in some ways, right? Like, I think this day and age, it's so easy to kind of, you know, see some image on Twitter or LinkedIn or in a magazine or what are they, anywhere, right? And be able to find out who's responsible for it, right? Or a piece of work or a demo or whatever. So it's never been easier to find people who are good at a thing, right? I think the thing is, like, we often, the struggle comes when you find the person, but then you have no way of contacting them or no idea of their expectations around, you know, a potential role or that kind of thing. So like a lot of the time we advise people that anywhere that they have like a publicly viewable profile that they're likely to share some of their work or their talents, try and treat it like a bit of a business card. So like, for example, on Twitter, have a contact email or, you know, a link to your portfolio or something. Even if it's not actually the primary driver, it's so dominant when I Google for someone's name plus their work or something like that, right? Like it's so dominant because of just the way the internet works, or Google specifically, that you need to kind of be covering all the angles. So everywhere should be sort of like a little bit of a side hustle or presented in a way that would, you know, make it easier. But that's not to say that we don't, you know, put out job requests and job adverts, things like that, offer positions. And there's you know, Slack channels for it. There's LinkedIn, but predominantly is social media is in one form or another is the way that we kind of find our talent. And that's part of a conscious drive to not rely on the network of people that we already know, because we're missing out on the things, the people that we don't know, right? And we diversify and get more exciting ideas that way.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's easy to hire people that you already know within your own networks, but then you might be missing out on some really good talent if you do it that way. Nisha, are you the same? Do you like to check everywhere, or do you take a more targeted approach?
A bit of both, depending on what roles we are hiring for. To give you an idea, we have grown sort of over 200% over the last 6 months. There's some really significant hiring going on, and I guess it's forced us to look at lots of different options. So whether that be
Your daughter has some thoughts as well, apparently.
my
Recruitment practices.
Sorry. So whether that be through socials, so that's quite a significant way that we look to hire as well. Whether that's, I think we've heard from Ian on Aardvark and Games Job Direct, but at the same time, like you said, sort of going outside of the pool of talent that you, or the kind of recruitment methods that you kind of go to by default, helps to diversify, and diversity and inclusion and sort of looking at recruitment strategies is high on our agenda. So we try to encourage that as much as we can. Really sorry about that, guys.
No, it's absolutely fine about it. We are actually running a little bit late, so I think it's time to wrap up now. But thank you so much, Andrew and Nisha, for your time.